for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. You just light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.
Smile on me.
God has smiled.
He has set me free. God has smiled on me.
He has smiled on me.
He's been good.
Has been so good
to me.
to me. Sing it, sing it, sing it. God
Smile.
God has smiled on me.
He has set me free.
Set me free. Oh my God.
Smile on.
He has smiled on me.
He's been good.
He's been so good.
Oh, so
He's been so good. Yeah.
he's been good.
So good.
Oh, so
God has been so good.
he's been
God's been so good.
oh, so
Don't you agree with me? God has been so good. He's been
oh, so
God has been so Don't you believe it?
He's been
God's so good to me, and He's so good to you too. God's so good, He's wherever you are, wherever you're going, God's so good to us. He's good to me. Whoa. God's good. God is so good.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hugh Peanuts Whalen. Lord have mercy. Thank you, Lord. Yes, he has been good, hasn't he? When you can be 79 and still get up and sing and play. He said, if you still get up, you're good. I want to bring back out to the stage a young lady who has just completely changed the way I look at what you call a singer. But she's so much more. Please welcome Layla Hathaway.
Don't ask me why, don't wonder how, don't bother asking how it's possible to love someone like you. It's 'cause you're mine, it's 'cause you're you, it's 'cause I'm love. It's what I do. Nothing you do, nothing you say, nothing could change the love that I promised you. When I promised you, I'd say, it's 'cause you're mine, it's 'cause you're you. It's 'cause I'm love. It's what I do. Yes, I know all there is to ever know, where you've been and where you'll ever go. All your mistakes from yesterdays and the ones you'll make tomorrow. You've been trying so hard to comprehend what kind of love could cover all that
conversation about how there's no more black success. And what I'm telling you is that a lot of people who come from these countries are wealthy.
Change my love for you. Don't ask me why. Don't wonder how. Don't bother asking how.
Mm-hmm. You want it on? Did you want it back on? No, I'm not talking.
Is Crystal coming? Let me check. Good morning. Is Crystal going to be here?
Her daughter had the flu. She had to keep her out.
Her daughter has the
Wow, that happens every time. Wow, it happens.
Oh, man.
Stay out.
Morning, Dave. Morning.
I got you. Hey, I see you on TV.
Well, how you? Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the West Louisville Forum brought to you by Simmons College of Kentucky. Today we're continuing a series. This is a three-part series reassessing Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision 54 years later. So our topic is, where do we go from here? Before we continue and before we introduce today's participants, I'd like to share an announcement. Next Wednesday, mark your calendars. Next Wednesday, April 13th at 12 noon, right here in the Family Life Center, Reverend Kevin Cosby and Dr. Ricky Jones are going to be presenting The Slow Destruction of Blackness in Kentucky Higher Education. Kentucky has a troubling track record on racial marginalization in higher education. In this session, Black scholars and institutional leaders will come together to discuss how this has impacted higher education in Kentucky. So we encourage you to mark your calendars, be here next week, this time and this place. Also, we'd like to announce Simmons College of Kentucky's graduation date is going to be on Saturday, May the 14th at 5 p.m. at St. Stephen Church in the sanctuary, and our guest speaker is going to be Hannah Drake. So we're very much looking forward. Amen. There we go. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to that. At this time, let's receive the president of Simmons College of Kentucky, the Reverend Dr. Kevin W. Cosby.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jobs, and welcome to everyone to another edition of our forum, West Louisville Forum, where we engage in ideas and we also introduce the community and the nation to ideas that can empower the Black community. And I'd like to welcome those who are watching online. We're glad that you are with us. And we're honored to have as our special guest today someone whose work has been transformative. And that is, and I say this with great pride, Dr. Yvette Carnell. She was here, I believe it was in 2017, and she made a statement in 2017 that has set the tone in the United States for the whole question of reparations. And this is what she said right here back in 2017 when she was interviewed.
Countries are wealthy. The people, a lot of Nigerians I know who came here came from good families. They had maids. I want to talk to the maid. Like I'm the maid. I'm the maid. That's who I am in this country. I didn't have a maid or a butler. I come from maids and butlers. Okay. So for you to say that we're the same people because we got nappy hair and dark skin. I had people told me when Obama came along, well, Yvette, he's blacker than you. He's darker than you. So what you talking about? Wait a minute. You seeing us through the prism of complexion as opposed to the prism of lineage? That's the problem. Lineage matters more than everything. And I'm not saying that you can't do business with nobody. You can't have other allies. But you have to look at people through the lens of lineage. What is your lineage? Nice people all the time when they come to me and they say, I don't know. I say, first of all, who you? Tell me about you. Tell me have a conversation about how there's no more Black success.
That issue, and she said it in 2017, lineage, has shifted the whole reparations debate in the United States. But the person who helped to conceptualize that it is a lineage claim, was Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. There is a scripture, and I'm paraphrasing it, but when I think of Yvette and Antonio, I think of what the Apostle Paul said to the church at Corinth, because it was a church he founded, but there was a lot of schism. As soon as he established the church, there came in these groups that divided the church at Corinth. And this is what he wrote to them and said. And so I kind of played with it a little bit, but this is what he said in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 15. It says, for even if you had 10,000 others to teach you about reparations, Christ, you have only one spiritual parent. For I became your parent in Christ Jesus when I preached the good news to you about reparations. In other words, there will be a whole lot of people who will now teach about reparations. But if you want to know who the parent is, the mother is, in our era, who helped frame the whole conversation of reparations that is gaining tremendous momentum in the United States today, it is the woman who I am presenting. Brothers and sisters, won't you receive my sister, my mentor, and that is Doctor, I was going to say Reverend, but she's Bishop, Yvette Carnell.
I was gonna say, as loud as I talk, I don't think I need. I'm always yelling somewhere, so this, this wouldn't be any different. But it really is something to have seen that clip um, from so long ago, and to see how at that moment I was just kind of Antonio and I were just kind of yelling into the wind, to so to speak. And reparations was considered largely a joke. Nobody's going to take that seriously. What are you talking about? Why are you wasting our time? We don't need it. We can work and get it, and we can make up the difference. And the whole data that Antonio brought shows you that you can't make it up. You just can't make it up with labor, and labor is getting less. So everything inherited wealth is the ball game. And then when you start talking about inherited wealth, you talk about who gets it. And when we talk about King, the one thing King understood without question was that we had our own identity and we were our own group. And he even shunned those of us who thought we were some kind of other ethnic group and who had decided that we were going to wear dashikis and whatever the case may be, because we were going to be something other than what we're not, which is the American Negro. And the place he put us in is interesting that we're talking about King today, because the place that he put us in, he gave us a framework. What do you do when one of your great leaders leaves you a framework and you don't do anything about it? And you don't do anything with it? And if he's slaughtered, I say all the time, King marched in his Sunday best, non-violently, as a Christian pastor, and America rewarded him with a bullet. And if that man sacrificed everything to bring us, this is your identity, this is who you are, this is what you're owed, by what right have we all these years said, we don't want to listen to that? We still gonna put this dashiki back on. We still gonna say we can work ourselves out of it. We still not gonna pay any attention to the Homestead Act. We still not gonna pay any attention to this accrued disadvantage. We still not gonna pay any attention to what we're owed in this country, as everybody else walks away with a specific claim. Who are we to say we're not gonna have advocacy in the path that we should have advocacy? Who are we to say we're not gonna follow King's path? How many people do you know, when we talk about activism, who are willing to lay their life down on the line? How many people do you know can have a vision of their own death and still walk that path? You know it's coming and you keep walking. How many people do you know who are willing to do that? And when we talk about what our activism has to look like in 2022, it has to be very specific and very sacrificial, because King's walk has not changed. And if you want to walk in that path of being an activist, first of all, you have to understand that everything you do is for your people, because you cannot come outside of that. If we're talking about environment, we got to talk about environmental racism first. If we're talking about climate change, we got to talk about how hot spots inform our advocacy for our people and why we're in these communities. The government made the ghetto. FDR, he gets lauded, but how those governments were handed out, he helped do that. Dr. King warned about white liberalism and their inability to sacrifice. He warned about black people. He said, listen, you are American descendants of slavery. You aren't fully in the ball game either. Most of you all were not with me either. Everybody says I marched with King. Nobody got a picture. I marched with King. Okay. I'm supposed to believe that because you don't seem much of a marching type today. I don't see it in you. And that's a problem for our activism, is that we don't really understand the walking in the path of King is walking in the path of being that sacrificial lamb. That might happen, but you just walk until the job is done. If the job ain't finished, you can't stop. You can't stop because America has given us certain accoutrements that make us look like we might have something. You have a nice jacket, you have a nice shirt, you kind of feel a certain way. That doesn't change the plunder. How many times does the Bible mention plunder? That has not changed just because we feel and we behave and we act a certain way. We cannot think ourselves out of this. This is no positive thinking out of this. King was very clear about what we did not do and what we have to do and what we must do. The directives that he gave and where do we go from here, it has not changed. The kind of activism we have to have in terms of what he put there, it has not changed. The only thing that has changed is our ability to follow. We don't have when the man died, the mission died. And when you look around here and you say, where is the Black leadership and why aren't they doing enough specifically for us as a group, considering how down we are in terms of our wealth, in terms of incarceration? When you look at that, when you understand that, you have to understand that the path of our activism died with King. And after that, it was just a co-opt. After that, people got scared. We saw a man get shot down on a balcony. So we said, well, maybe I'll go the other way, and if they pay me a little bit, I'll be all right. It's okay. I don't want to be on that balcony. That's all I know. And there is no reward without great risk. Life just doesn't happen that way. Activism just doesn't happen that way. Activism is a risk. There is also a great reward. But if you are a leader in that space, you may not live to see it. That's just the cost of it. Or you may just burn out. That's just the cost of it. The cost is the cost, and the activism is the activism. So if I'm saying something about MLK and where do we go from here, I'm saying that book is a condemnation of our politics. How we have allowed him to be whitewashed into just having an affinity for one another. Black girls and black boys sitting beside each other. How we have allowed that to happen is a condemnation of us and our activism. And it need not be that way. One of the things that we've done as ADOS is that we have put forth a path that walks in line of what King did and what King believed and what King wanted. And we've centered it on reparations, but we also have a Black agenda, and I think that's what has to happen. We have to be willing to put some skin in the game. And this is the last thing I'll say. What has happened previously, and I see this too much in activism circles, is that everybody believes that their job, instead of actually putting together a plan and getting out there and executing, everybody wants to be a member of the wise council. But let me just tell Yvette what I think she should be doing better. But have you lifted up a finger to help? Have you? Well, no, I just, I'd be busy. But I really think you should X, Y, and Z. We have to come to the point where that's just not good enough. And we have to call each other out about how that is not good enough, and that is not how we do politics, and that is not how we do advocacy. Everybody has to carry their own weight, and sometimes a little bit more. And King carried a lot of that weight and died at a very early age because of it. And you have to, everybody in this room and outside of this room has to learn that that may be the cost, but there's a cost to this path. And I don't think anybody wants to walk it, but I think everybody wants to eat the fruit that comes from it.
Joel Gaza, who are staff at Simmons College, and they're going to engage her in a dialogue and then ask some questions. But before they come, Yvette said when Martin died, the movement died. So those who were his disciples, I heard you say this, they tapped out. Could you elaborate more on that? That the movement that King framed for us on that balcony, April the 4th, 1968, that we experienced tremendous mission drift.
Well, we saw Andy Young talk about how it was good that in Atlanta we brought Wall Street in. Right, in Atlanta, this man was the mayor. He was King's ace. That it was good that we brought Wall Street in. I don't understand how bringing Wall Street into a city, and inviting them in has anything to do with King's legacy. I think after he passed, there were a lot of people who said, "There's money in that blood, and I'm going to go and get some." And whether it comes through me, whether it comes through or in the way of getting activism and just going, we have a lot of activism that gets close but no cigar, right? A lot of them decided to do that. And I sometimes you have to wonder if a person could predict it as well, right? Because you can do stuff and not know that this isn't going to turn out well. For instance, you might think in 1985 that if you coalition with enough people and if you help them with what they have to do, they will repay that. And they will be in solidarity with you. It just didn't happen. And so some of it you can't call, sort of animosity or grifting. Some of it is just you made a mistake. And we are now as a group, we have to undo that mistake. And part of what happens right now in terms of our own advocacy is undoing the bad politics of generations before us.
Thank you, Dr. Carnell. You get right in. Basically, I listened to Dr. Carnell last night, your MLK speech. I think on your podcast,
Okay.
on YouTube. I was catching up and catching information and catching knowledge, and I appreciate everything you said here, and then just doing the research of it. We're just having a few questions, and of course, I think at some point we'll open it up to the audience who have questions, things, just to keep the conversation going and to get an idea, a stronger idea of what where we go from here and what we're doing. I wanted to really get into a couple of weeks ago when Dr. Gaza spoke, we talked about reparations. He talked about reparations through your particular research. So I think a good way to open it up is to further define what you're saying about reparations, or what are the sort of specific points of reparations that we need to focus on. I was just in class teaching. I was chair of the cross-cultural communication department at Simmons College of Kentucky, and we were just talking about the semantics and how different, when you hear reparations, historically we'll hear that ancient 40 acres and a mule saying, right? And where do we, but just wanting to hear from you more specifically into the audience, what are the particular points of reparations that you're focusing on?
Well, I think wealth is taken, so wealth has to be repaid, right? But you also have to figure out who that goes to. So it's not just, and one of the things we've tried to really come out of as part of the movement is to come outside of just blackness, because there's no such thing as this sort of flat blackness. It just doesn't exist. Everybody has a particular lineage. I don't care whether you're Haitian American, whether you're a Ghanaian American, or whether you're an American descendant of chattel slavery. And so part of what we've tried to do is redefine who are we? Because if you're confused about who you are, then we get into a situation where reparations can never happen, because America would never just give money out based on melanin, and rightfully so. There is a cost, and the people who built the country and still bear that cost, that's who gets reparations. And you have to lay that out. And if you don't lay that out, you get lost. And I think part of what's happened is that people have gotten lost in melanin, as opposed to really getting found in lineage, right? Lineage is who you are. That's your grandmama, your great grandmama. That's who was a sharecropper, the slave. That's where you found. And I think generations we have been. I can say since King died, we ran outside and said, "I'm black and I'm proud, and I have on a dashiki, and this is who I am, and this is somehow meaningful to my life." Now I understand that reflexively when white America says black is awful, that you want to do the thing and say I'm black and I'm proud. But I think one thing that has to stop happening is that we have to stop being so reflexive to the white gaze. People will tell you all the time, nobody knows the difference about who I am. If I am Congolese and you're ADOS, I still can't catch a cab. Well, I'm not going to look at myself through the lens of a racist cab driver, right? That's not the lens through which we should understand ourselves. So the first thing you have to do is begin to understand who we are. If you don't understand who you are, everybody will take advantage of you because you're lost, and lost people get taken advantage of.
Thank you. Dr. Gaza, would you chime in on some of your particular points on reparations as it relates to some of the things that Dr. Carnell pointed out?
Well, I'd like to first begin by saying thank you for taking time to be here
Thank
with
you.
us.
Always.
Just such an honor. And one of the things with inheritance and with lineage that is really interesting for me about the conversation on reparations is that we come to a place of many people ask, well, can we afford it? And what is so interesting in the moment that we live in is that over the next 25 years, there is going to be a $68.4 trillion of wealth transfer. That wealth transfer is going to go to people with a lineage that looks like me. And so the question that we face in reparations advocacy or not, it's possible. And it's not whether or not it's affordable. And so my question for you is, within your advocacy, what do you see as the barriers that we must be fighting against right now to take down when we know that we can afford it, when we know that it is possible? What is the work that is ahead of us?
Well, I think Obama and it's funny because both Obama and Trump created a slew of white millionaires, right? Your first black president he said he was against reparations, but he created a bunch of new white millionaires. And I don't think cost is the thing that's prohibitive in this conversation. America has never decided that they were going to do the right thing in terms of us. The decision has never been made. We can figure out every other aspect of it, but until we have a collective decision as a country and say, you know what, this happened and we owe it. We've made that decision for other groups. The decision just hasn't been made for us. And America has to say, you know what, these people are still bearing a cost. And one of the things that happens, even in our group, is we pretend like we're not bearing the cost. We see somebody draped in diamonds or something, and we say, see, he got it, we can do it. Not understanding that you don't know what's in his account. Because the data speaks to the issue, and the data says we don't have real class structure. We don't have what would you, when you see it, you see a collapsed group economically. And a collapsed group, when the whole group is collapsed, that is intentional. No group just collapses on its own. Now, the narrative of America has been that these people are deficient. That's why they're collapsed. But when you come outside of that, you realize, wait a minute, that's not true. You realize that we're still living the consequence of slavery. Somebody in this country has to eat the failure. There has to be a garbage disposal. There has to be somewhere where you put the power plant that causes cancer. There has to be somewhere where you put the hot spots. It has to happen. There has to be somebody who, we got to put in jail so they can make cheap products, right? America has just chosen us. And it's time for us to say, I don't know, I don't care what you do, I don't care how you do it. You have to make us whole, and you can't choose us no more. We're not doing this. We've done this since we've been here. We're not going to be this bottom caste group anymore. So I think that's the prohibitive thing. I don't think it's money. I think people say money because, that's a dodge. People say, oh, I don't know where did the money come from? I don't know where all the money came from that just went away to Ukraine. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what print and press it came from, but I know it's gone. So we can absolutely do it. We do war. We do everything. We can do it. It absolutely can do it. America doesn't have the will to do it.
I'll echo something James Baldwin said in a speech I listened to years ago to point out that King lost his life working for higher wages for garbage men, for trash men. When we talk about the particular institutions that are created to create caste systems, or create a particular group, putting a particular group of Black folk in particular places of inferiority, of disempowerment, and just sort of how that functions on so many different levels is what we sort of is. I think is what you're getting at, what I'm thinking about as far as everything you're saying, and how that translates over into this sort of, I think, moral issue, or this issue of particular education. It's not all about economics, right? But when you hear about those men getting killed brutally on a garbage truck, and then months later, weeks later, this man gets assassinated brutally on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, just 54 years ago Tuesday, then it brings forth just the holistic aspect of it, or the fuller picture of it, outside of economics as well, to point out, just highlighting the things that you're highlighting beyond it being an economic thing. It's a moral thing, it's a political thing, and so many others. To that point, I will ask you to also think in your talk yesterday, the question came up about political education. So we're operating in these particular spaces of academia, higher ed. How do you define political education is the basic question. And it sort of speaks to like people like myself, when we're in those particular classrooms teaching our kids, our students, what are we saying to them to get them educated from a particular perspective to think about these particular issues that you're talking about?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is make sure you're educating them to action. Because what we have too often is somebody comes in this space and they write a book or whatever, and they go and they get speaking fees, and it's just over. And we have to create a culture of movement politics where people get involved in the movements where they want to see change happen, as opposed to just believing and agreeing with something. And I think you also have to let people know, you also have to be very, very clear, you know, even to white America, that, you know, because you have to kind of unlodge the bad thinking that is here. And there's a lot of things that need to be learned and unlearned. So you have to help them understand that, listen, you can be a totally not a racist person. That doesn't change America. Your heart, see, when you have institutions that are racist, they're on auto. The only thing they need is for you to just continue to live your life. You can be a great person, but if you don't change these institutions, you become a part of the problem. And so we have to educate people to understand it's just not about hearts and minds. That's a part of the political education. But you have to educate people to act. How do you act? How do you organize? What do you believe? What are your virtues? What are your values? What will you never sell out? Some things have to be sacred. And one of those things in terms of reparations is our justice claim. But you always have to let people know that you're just not educating them so that they have a specific kind of knowledge. You're educating them so they have a specific kind of action. And that is what we want to see, because you don't get anywhere with people who just believe a certain thing when they aren't willing to act on the thing that they believe in.
Amen to that. You want to add anything, Joel?
Yeah, I think one of the questions, that I would have for you in this time, part of this is coming from a class that we're doing at Simmons, where we're talking about Ella Baker and Malcolm X and Martin King. In this transformative time, what do you think are some of the lessons that we need to take from that generation that really embraced the self-sacrifice that was necessary to transform our society? What are some of the lessons that you think we could glean from that era?
Well, I think one of the things that happened in that era is that you had, and it wasn't everybody, it wasn't even the majority then, but it was just an understanding, I got to do what I got to do. Like, I got to just go, and I go until I can't go, right? And I teach those who come under me, and we just go. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is how we organize. This is how we hit the streets, right? And this is what we're organizing on behalf of. Because if you don't have a good why in terms of why you're doing it, you won't last long, because organizing is mostly drudgery. Like trying to convince people when you have their best interest at heart of an idea that is good for them, and they're just like, no, I don't even know. I don't know, Yvette. that is something that can really kill a spirit really fast. And so you have to create tribes of people basically to kind of encourage one another to do the hard work that needs to be done in spite of whatever disagreements they may or may not have. You have to have that because we know if you read some of the books, Ella, she wasn't too keen on King. A lot of the, she wasn't. So you have to, I'm gonna do the work and the world will see me later, maybe. It might not see me today, but this work benefits me, it benefits my community. So I'm not walking out of here right now because I'm not getting the due that I'm owed, right? You have to have a sense of community. And I think one of the things that's happened to us in our community is that we got caught up in American individualism. Instead of American community, instead of our institutions, instead of our community, our church, whatever, we thought, I'm gonna get mine, you gotta get yours. I got mine out the mud. Go get yours out the mud. Ain't none of y'all got nothing in the mud. Ain't nothing in the mud. So it's this idea that, listen, rugged individualism only works for people who have wealth. If you don't have wealth, you can't go out here and maneuver the way that you can maneuver. Ain't nothing you can do. You're not passing anything down. We have people power. And this only works with people power. And people power only work if the people see themselves as a part of a group, a shared group with a shared past, a shared lineage, a shared history, and a shared future. And we have to get back there.
Doctor, let me ask this. What distinguishes ADOS from Black Lives Matter?
I don't know what Black Lives Matter stands for. I just saw a story, in the news that Patrice Cullors bought a $6 million house somewhere, and the defense was, well, the house wasn't used for me as a personal thing; it was used for the movement. I don't know what movement needs a $6 million house. We have activism we need to do, lawsuits we need to file, and the people who gave Black Lives Matter that money gave it because bodies were dropping in the street. We had it here with Breonna Taylor. We saw black men from George Floyd, the trade. Your money came from dead black bodies. And for you to go and spend that on a multi-million-dollar home, it means that this isn't even mission drift. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you stand for. I don't know. There is every year, the last time they were dancing, we were dancing for freedom. Nobody gave you multi-million dollars. White America didn't give you all that money. Black America didn't give you all that money. People of color America didn't give you all that money. So you could do stuff. You could build stuff. You could go buy a house. I think the difference is that we actually have a mission. We actually have something that we stand for. Reparations and a transformative Black agenda. That is who we are. That is what we stand for. That is what we're working toward. That is what we're building. They had chapters which were basically, some of the chapters were not under them. Some of them, they said were, some of them got money, some of them didn't. And then they said when some of the chapters and people acted up, they said that they're not related to me or whatever, but you didn't build a real organization. So anybody can say Black Lives Matter and be associated with you. This is why you have to have actual chapters. And that's what we're working on in the ADOS movement. You have to have actual chapters and affiliated agreements where you have to behave a certain way. Certain behaviors are condoned, not condoned. All of that. And leadership comes from the top. I'm sorry, people who say, well, you don't, and I understand, I disagree with some very prominent people. I've seen Tea Party, I've seen Black Lives Matter, I've seen Occupy Wall Street, I've seen leaderless movements come and go. Every corporation, every military, everything that is successful at anything has a hierarchy because somebody has the buck stops with me. This was my fault and I'm gonna fix it. And I think that's one major difference, but there are a few.
To me, that just speaks to this communication that functions throughout our society, through our media. You can go and hear people talk about once people are in the streets, how Black Lives Matter, how the hashtag itself can sort of just widespread like wildfire, so many different ways, and to the point where it can be problematic. You have people basically, I recall stories of people going to marches or going to protests, and it's not what they were expecting when they got there, or they were not doing what this other group is doing over here in this particular space. That actually makes me think back on the sort of intersectionality of I would say of like King and someone like Malcolm, or the Black Power movement, or if you watch Selma, the movie Selma, when Snick is arguing with King and they're trying to basically iron out the particular differences between the two, and thinking about how ADOS is functioning as sort of an advancement maybe of this particular moment of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter comes out of it comes from the death of Trayvon Martin 20 years ago in February, right? And to knowing from that hashtag, then other conversations were gonna flourish from that. Other issues were gonna flourish from that. And sort of ADOS functioning maybe as an event of that cause, bringing in new language that we need to sort of think about, such as reparations.
Well, I think for us, we just focus on what matters most, right? None of these other things that people are talking about matter if you don't have the wealth to be American. So for us, it's just about what does our community need to be made whole? How can we live an American life? And you don't do that without wealth. And right now, all that wealth those wealth transfers are coming from parents and grandparents and so on and so forth. And I just want everybody, if you haven't, just look at the landscape right now. If you would have told me 18 years ago, even 7 years ago, that Black Lives Matter, that Campaign Zero, that all of these movements that had cropped up, that they were all going to be unraveling, I would have said, you got to be crazy. But that's exactly what has happened. They're all coming undone. And we may even see more of that as we come, because people are going to look for, people want to do good work. People want to give to organizations and people doing good work. And in terms of making ADOS whole, there's only one movement that is doing that and has been doing that. Everybody else is, even with millions of dollars, they're still trying to find their way.
Sure. My last question, and I'm going to kind of layer two questions together, is one of the things that has simply never happened in this nation was repentance. So slavery falls, we don't repent, white supremacy resurrects. Jim Crow falls, we don't repent, white supremacy resurrects. Within reparations, is there, in your imagination, a role for repentance nation? And then also for white allies that support your work, what are some of the hallmarks that you look for? What do you want particularly white people to hear as we fight for this moment of justice that is so urgently needed?
Well, I think I want white people to understand is that this is your moment the same way the end of the Civil War was your moment, in the sense of the former slaves who were let out were just kind of let out like cattle. And the federal government abandoned the South. So when you do that, you refuse to hold accountable the people who need to be held accountable. I can trace that. I can draw a line from that all the way to January the 6th.
Oh, yeah.
How comfortable you felt in that building doing those things. You felt very comfortable because you haven't been held accountable. And there was no accountability for the people who engaged in the first Civil War. So we're gonna, listen, if you don't take care of something, if you don't fix it in your life, if you have something wrong with your car and you just kind of put a Band-Aid on it, well, I'm just gonna put a little oil in here and wipe this down or whatever the thing is, eventually it crops right back up. It don't go away. Even in terms of your spiritual life, what happens if you don't learn a lesson? It comes right back. It just comes back in a different form, and it gets worse and worse and worse until you fix it. And we're at a point where if white America were to say, you know what, we owe this, let's just get it figured out. Let's get at the table and get it figured out. It can take time. It can be multi-generational, but let's get this figured out. We could do this, but if we don't learn that lesson, we have an accountability problem in this country. And it means the people who are always in the way, because we don't have, it's not the sense of that all of white America is in the way. You just won't get the people out of the way who have always been such a problem. You won't get them out of politics. You won't get them out of anything. And so we have to be as ADOS, we have to be the shining light and say, this is old. And it is a blight, it is a stain on this country that this has not been paid. And I think, white America, those who want the same thing and see what we see in terms of how that makes this country a better country, you just have to stand with us, and you have to stand against those own elements. You might have to stand against your own grandmama because she's got a Confederate flag, and you know what that means. But if you can't stand up to your own people, I don't know how you can stand up to your own government.
Let's give it up. And we're going to open it up for questions. Dr. Yvette, I want to recommend that you do two things, everyone here. Go on YouTube and watch the interview of Martin Luther King Jr. that was done at Ebenezer Baptist Church in color 11 months before his assassination. Secondly, go on YouTube and listen to Dr. King's speech entitled The Three Evils of Society. And King specifies three evils: racism, materialism, and militarism. Doc, it seems to me that the mistake we made was that we dropped racism and focused, at least liberal progressives, on materialism, and that's the wealth gap in general, and militarism, but we did not talk about racism and the unique, as you call it, justice claims that Black people have. And we just became like a Bernie Sanders type and just talk about class or militarism. But King said the three evils. It's not just what Bernie Sanders is talking about, class, or what Al Gore's talking about in terms of climate change or something. He said it's racism. And he was talking just about what you're talking about in terms of repairing the damage, in terms of economic repair.
Well, for me, I think it's very simple. Class doesn't fix race, and race doesn't fix lineage. So you can bring in diversity all day long, but that doesn't fix this group that comes from slavery. And we stopped talking about that. We started saying, like what you said, what Bernie Sanders said. Well, if we, and you have to, and at a certain point, we've all kind of been like, well, that's better than what we've been doing. In a choice of Bernie Sanders against Hillary, I chose Bernie. But that doesn't mean that, see, the thing is, if we live, they say, well, we can give everybody, we can just pay off everybody's college debt. That increases the racial wealth gap. Do you know who went to college most? And I say this as a college graduate. Do you know who has more degrees? Like, do you know who has more advanced degrees? It just isn't a fix. It's just not specific. When you want to cure something, you cure that specific thing. If I break a leg, you don't take me to the hospital and put me in a body cast. You have to target it. And we understand that kind of targeting. When it comes to other groups, we absolutely understand what that targeting looks like. When we pay reparations to Guam, we understand that this happened to this country. We understand it, except when it comes to us. And everybody tries to feed us this idea that you can absolutely fix race with just like class uplift. And it just doesn't happen, because that's not how you fix a specific harm. You don't fix a specific harm with something that goes to everybody. So wait a minute, somebody stole $100 from me, and your fix is to just give everybody in America $100? No, it was specifically stolen from me. And the problem with the left is that when you bring up that specific, they don't want to hear it. All they want to hear is, well, we can just make everything better for everybody. No, it still won't be better for me. It'll be better for you because you'll have parents' wealth and college debt gone. It won't be better for me. And so I think that we have to understand that too, to be able to teach it to other people and say, this is why just a leftist agenda that improves the quality of life. And I'm in favor of improving the quality of life, but you also have to pay back the wealth.
Thank you. Well, are there any questions?
Metaphorically. And then, oh, I'm sorry. This idea of what do I do on Monday? And the other idea is it's not about color, white, black. It's about lineage. It's about history. The other thing is it's about, sorry, I'm nervous. It's about mindset. It's about educate, which is what you are doing and what a lot of us are doing. The other is wealth and debt. I know myself, I think, what am I going to leave my children? And I think maybe a lot of people think that, past and now. And the thing is, what if you leave your children with nothing? And what if you leave your children with debt? And there are people that don't have wealth who leave their children with debt. And then those people leave their children with more debt. That's what's happened over the years. The other is, and I love the word you said, is repent. It's one thing to change. It's another thing to say, forgive me for the past. And I don't agree with guilt. I don't want children to feel guilty. I want them to feel responsibility. That they're responsible to do something about this situation. So.
Yeah. Great comment. Thank you. And I think what you do on Monday is you commit yourself to being involved with the ADOS Advocacy Foundation. And I would prefer it be, I prefer people to get involved more than a donation, but that helps too. America's run on money. But we will be rolling out chapters come summer. So I look forward to everybody being involved in that movement in a meaningful way, because we are trying to do good work.
Thank you. Just last week, as I understand it from the news reports, a commission in California made a decision about reparations. So my question for anybody on the panel is about this. The commissions decided in a divided decision that any reparations would be about lineage, but they haven't done anything yet about the money. So my question for anybody on the panel is, having made a decision about lineage, but nothing about money, is this progress?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's a double-edged sword. And it's even interesting about the designation of lineage, because that first clause says African American or African American enslaved person, and they can go back and change it. But the thing that I didn't see there was American. And what we have always said in this country is that you have to. That's in the second part of the clause. There's an or. Very interesting language. You have to make it about being an American descendant of chattel slavery. You may have to even go further to make it about who got off of those slave ships that came from Africa, as opposed to you don't want to get involved in a conversation about white cargo. You remember that book? So it could be local reparations, and I'm going to take it just off California. Local reparations that define lineage could be positive if they're used to pressure the federal government to say this, and HR 40 and everybody who's doing that, say this is how it has to happen. You could use that as leverage, and you could use it as documentation, like what Jacory did in Louisville and what he was working on in terms of let's lay out what this state or this city did in terms of oppressing a group of people. Let's lay that out. So you could normalize the idea of lineage as well. That could be good as well. But the problem is always that you just brought up, Chris. The problem always when it comes to local reparations is they don't have enough money. I mean, we saw that in Evanston. People, bingo balls popped up, and some people got a little bit of money to put a dishwasher in or fix their roof, and they called it reparations. It's not reparations, and people get to run around and call stuff reparations that is not reparations because it's not going to be enough money. Now, if you would say we're going to do reparations, it would need to be cash payments. But again, the problem becomes it's not going to be enough. And so I think we need to understand as a community, as people, as concerned citizens about this issue, is that there is no kind of way to do local reparations that doesn't bring a cost to bear to the federal government, because your eye should still be focused on Capitol Hill, because that's the only way to get true redress. And you can leverage a local referendum to do that, but you have to focus on who has that money. And when we're talking about trillions of dollars, it ain't your local or state government.
Thank you for being here. The question that I have is, you spoke a bit on California and AB 3121, and reparations has become part of the national discussion, and it is the political education of yourself and Antonio Moore that has brought this to the fore. We've heard from you that the ADOS Advocacy Foundation will be doing things themselves to push reparations. There are a number of groups now operating in this space, and we have divergent ideas on how it's done. There is a legacy organization that wants to do a flat black case, but there are organizations that do believe in reparations for Black American descendants of slavery. How will the Advocacy Foundation move in this space in the days and months ahead?
I mean, it's not even a question for me. I mean, everything that's in this space is created by ADOS. So I think we continue to move as the leaders in this space. That's the position we occupy. So.
I got a statement and a question. And the first statement goes to Dr. Cosby. In February, we celebrated Black History, 28 days. And I want to thank Dr. Cosby for saying that we don't celebrate just 28 days, but we ought to celebrate Black History 365 days plus leap year 366 days. I want to thank you, Dr. Cosby, for that statement. Also, Yvette, my question to you is, at this moment, when we leave here, where do we go from here?
Very good question. Very good question. Everything is about, like, well, the same thing she said, what do we do on Monday? I think, you know, we've talked about the chapters and everything that's coming, right? The other thing that people need to do, there is a Goodreads list. If you do Google Goodreads and you Breaking Brown, you'll come to a Goodreads list that has all the books that we've talked about or discussed or were part of the book club. Get yourself ready to have these intellectual debates that we're going to be having, because, you know, there has been a lot of time fighting other groups, in Cobra, NARC, or whatever the case may be. But the time is about to come where we're going to go toe to toe with America. And everybody needs to be able to win that debate about why reparations is owed, who got what. One of the first books we started off with was When Affirmative Action Was White, right? You have to be able to win that space, because that's part of organizing, is winning people over. And so you have to be able to do that. So if you're new to this and, you know, hey, I just saw this, where do I start? Give yourself the political education that we have been giving for the past few years. You can go look at some Breaking Brown videos as well, but there are some books in there that we discuss that'll get you ready to have this sort of intellectual debate that we're going to have.
African American descendants of slaves and opposed to American descendants of slaves. What distinction that is and how it's
For me, you know, I think we have to get away from this idea of Africanness. it's you don't even hear, like, you can have a white person who came here, from the potato famine, but they don't go around talking about how they identify with Europe, right? It we have this sort of affection for a continent, which doesn't even make sense, because you're talking about 54 countries, a bunch of different ethnic tribes, traditions, and we just have an affinity for a huge landmass. So I don't think we can do that. We can't do that anymore. And what I say is, we became different people when we were sold over here. When we got off those ships, when your ancestors got off those ships, they walked into something very different. And that became an American life. And what we're fighting for is to be true Americans in every sense of the word that includes wealth. That's what we've always fought for. We weren't fighting in this country to be African. We were fighting to be American and live an American life. And so America is the reason we haven't been able to live an American life, though. But everything that we are is anchored in our Americanness, even the good stuff and the bad, right? When we talk about what we come from, when we talk about our perseverance, when we talk about our freedom struggle, people get inspired around the world whenever we start fighting the monster, or when we start fighting the racism, we start fighting white supremacy, because they know they can do it too, right? There is such beauty in that. And I think you take away from that, if not, when you don't understand that this freedom struggle is an American freedom struggle. That's who we're fighting against. That's who we've been fighting against the whole time. None of us have any memory. Like, I'm not even just talking about institution. I'm not talking about individual memory. I'm talking about, none of us have any kind of memory in terms of our lineage of being anywhere other than America. And at a certain point, you just have to get real about who you are and what you are. We are American descendants of chattel slavery, and it's chattel slavery in this country. And that defines us. That's why we don't have wealth. And I think we like to get lost in this idea of dashikis and different things, because it's not painful. And the idea of what America has done to us is very painful. And it's an easy way to kind of psychologically escape that pain by putting on an identity that doesn't belong to you.
Wouldn't
If
it be
you,
correct
Dr.
to
King,
say
I'm sorry.
that middle passage, you sort of can focus on the middle passage to sort of kind of specify those descendants, right? The middle passage is those who came into the States through slavery. And that gets you sort of outside of the whole triangular trade and the slave trade in general, but focus specifically on those people who came. Now, where that also, I think, gets complicated is that historically we have in our leaders this sort of this transition into Pan-Africanism, thinking about Du Bois, with Malcolm, thinking about his particular sort of expansive knowledge and understanding of himself as it related to engaging in a politics that was based on morality and love, which is what King also preached on, right? But, and as I remember you saying, he was a minister, he was going to preach that, he was going to preach love, but how that sort of does take away from the focus, to the extent if I'm getting my ancestry.com box and doing the swab, getting ready to find out where I'm from in Africa, where does that place me in terms of still the specific lineage? And it's research dollars for my ancestry, but it's not so much research dollars for my lineage. You know what I mean? So thinking about how we can look at that and understand the specificity of what American descendants of slavery might mean. I don't know. I'm asking you if I'm right on that, or if I got a point on that. If I'm right on this, of sort of being able to specify those particular Black folk you're referring to, American descendants of slavery, in the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage were those people who came into the States primarily, and then how we have this particular moment historically where we as Black folk did sort of expand our into Pan-Africanism and things of that sort, became more global figures and things of that sense, and how that was kind of grounded in love and morality and things like that, but not getting away from the specifics of the descendants.
Can I say this to you about when you talk about Pan-Africanism, from Du Bois to Kwame Nkrumah, they had a different understanding of Pan-Africanism than what is being espoused today. They were not trying to displace ADOS. They were trying to move towards decolonialization and blacks globally uniting, but they were not trying to come over and take the place of ADOS. So Du Bois could work with them, and even, we're talking about where do we go from here? All you have to do is just read the chapter in King's book on Black Power. And in the chapter on Black Power, he says, we may have this affinity towards Africa. He said, but you're not Africans. He says, you are American, listen to me, American descendants of enslaved people who built the country. That's what King said.
Thank you.
Let's give it up for, yes, one last question. Very quickly.
Again, good to see you. Not just, to me, it's not just the where do we go from here, but it's also the whom do we go to from here. I agree with you. If we don't understand who we are, we can't take the action that's necessary for us to take. But when it's necessary to take action, to whom do you go? The King going to Birmingham was dealing with Bull Durham and the mayor of Birmingham. So there was a understanding, a focus to an individual or group to address those issues. So as we expand the collapse, politically speaking, where do we go and to whom do we focus on to bring us together for a group action?
Well, I think the demographics kind of make sense for me. It's funny that you mentioned going to, Alabama. When you go to Selma now, it's not much has changed in terms of that poverty rate, right? And especially amongst our people who live there. So I think you go to where we are the poorest, where there are the largest enough a number of, and where we have the least, right? And I think you can go right back to Selma, because King's dream wasn't realized. And I think even in that kind of prophetic moment where King said, I have a dream and I've seen it, I might not get there with you. I don't think he was talking about us just being able to be around white people. And I think his dream has not yet been realized. I think one of the tricks is that people convinced us that his dream is realized. We're around each other. No. That prophecy is not fulfilled. And I think we could go right back to Selma and do this all over again. We don't have to do it the same way King did it. It doesn't have to be that way. We learn and we unlearn some things, but you could go right back to where he was and be there and see. I don't care how many times Kamala stands there. I don't care how many times Barack stood there. Nothing changed except the figureheads who were there to mask our failure.
Let's give it up. I want to thank you so much for your great work and the influence that you have had upon all of us, the shadow that you are casting across this country. And may God continue to bless you. And we look forward to you coming again and again and again and again. We cannot get enough of Yvette Carnell.
May God bless Dr. Cosby as well. Okay.
Before we close out, and let's give it up for our panelists too also. And I'm putting him on the spot, the soon-to-be PhD, that don't mean phenomenally dumb, a pole hole digger, for the soon-to-be PhD, J. Van Reed. If he would come at this time and just say something to us about Simmons. And do we have some guests here from out of town? You just want to...
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. So thank you to everyone. So thank you, Dr. Cosby. Always. So Simmons College of Kentucky. Come on. It's such an amazing feeling to be in this space at this time to serve with giants and we see further. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. The foundation that Dr. Cosby has laid for this historical Black college, Louisville's only HBCU, right? It's been amazing to be a part of this journey. But in the fall semester, we are opening with 10 degrees. Come on, 10 academic offerings, right? Dr. Cosby tells a story about what happened a while ago with taking all of our academic programs and leaving us with the Bible. He says when they leave you with God, it's all you need, right? And it's just amazing to be wrapped in all what's happening in Falcons Nation, Simmons Nations right now. So again, 10 academic degree programs. We have new programs stood up for students to ensure that their success. And we're looking at creating what we're calling the Falcons Academic Center of Excellence. And so our final candidate for that role, she's Miss Ingrid Bowman Thomas, Dr. Ingrid Bowman Thomas. She's coming from Jacksonville, Florida. She's done a lot of work in the criminal justice space as well. And that's another exciting thing with Simmons College of Kentucky. We've submitted application to become what's called a second chance Pell institution, where we accept students who are currently incarcerated. So the opportunity to be transformational in their lives. The research essentially says that a person is 43% less likely to reoffend having access to post-secondary education. So that'll be another heavy lift for us, but at the same time, this is our raison d'etre. This is why we were put here in this time and this space. So we're truly excited to the partnerships. The three new degree options are applied mathematics, applied psychology, and computer information systems. And so we're in conversation now with Dr. Samantha Benton. Dr. Samantha Benton currently is at the Military College of Georgia. Is that correct? Georgia Military College, and we're in conversations about leading those efforts in the computer information system space. And so so many exciting things are happening, and we're just grateful. Enrollment started yesterday, and so our students are currently being pre-registered, and so we'll just assisting anyone who want to come to Simmons College. We want to provide the support to get through the doors and then out with $1 million handshake, as Dr. Jost called it, for our president. Evolve 502 is the scholarship opportunities. John Blackwell is heading up those initiatives, essentially in our admissions office. But there are so many opportunities for students to earn scholarships. So not only is we have access to the Pell Grant, and even if students wanted to take out college loans, but students also have access to 502 scholarship and other scholarship opportunity to essentially realize that that graduating from college is a true is within their reach, essentially. But the Vowel 502 scholarship opportunity is available at Simmons, and so many other scholarship opportunities. I've served at about 4 institutions, but I've never seen the amount of scholarship dollars that Simmons have for students, and even more so internships. So students have the opportunity to be immersed in some experiential learning opportunities that are really, really going to define what where they go beyond this experience. So truly exciting. Another thing we have going on is we're shooting a docu-series, and we hope to present our docu-series that the students will write, edit, and create along with a company. Yeah, we got a grant for that for it's almost $400,000, $200,000 in equipment, and $200,000 also to do the docu-series. And it's produced by Executive Director T.I. Grand Hustle Films. So Netflix opportunity, HBO opportunities. I mean, the sky's the limit for what we are about to do. I've been to Edward Waters College, or Edward Waters University now, excuse me, and which is also my alma mater. And I've been to Wilberforce University, and I've been to Wiley College, which is located in Marshall, Texas, and now Simmons College of Kentucky. Simmons College of Kentucky.
Thank you so very much. Look, don't forget, come and shake Yvette's hand with your mask on, or whatever, bump. And don't forget that Maddie's Kitchen is open. Please, you got to eat. Patronize this wonderful ADOS businesswoman. All right, she's downstairs. And they got fish and everything else. So, all right, thank you so much for being here with us. See you next week.